Do you feel like you're a victim of time poverty? That's the topic of today's Freedom Club podcast.
Welcome to the Freedom Club podcast, where we discover the fight for freedom, fulfillment, passion, and purpose. Your host is Curt Gallup certified strengths coach, an agency founder who is dedicated to coaching individuals seeking to level up their life and their businesses. The Freedom Club is about unlocking your talents, turning them into strengths, and crushing your objectives. You can learn more at curtmercadante.com. Welcome to the Freedom Club.
So welcome to the Freedom Club podcast. I am your host, your very gracious host, Curt Mercadante, and I'm feeling extremely grateful today. You know why? Because I happened to glance at my podcast stats yesterday, and I am like so close to surpassing 30,000 downloads of the Freedom Club podcast in 2018. I'm over 27,000 at this point. I need less than 3,000 here. And what do we got? I don't know, about 2 weeks left here to do it. So I thank you so much for listening, for downloading, whether this is your first episode or your 121st episode. We surpassed 100, a couple months ago. But I'm going to ask a favor of you. If you listen to this podcast on a regular basis and you like what you hear, I invite you to do two things. One is I invite you to visit wherever you listen to this podcast, and the great majority of people listen to the Freedom Club podcast on iTunes. Please visit our home on iTunes and leave us a positive rating and review. Those are like currency to us. They help us increase the reach of our podcast around the globe, and we have listeners in Uganda, Australia, China. We have Europe, all around the world. And so thank you so much. So if you would please do me that wonderful favor of leaving us a positive rating and review of the podcast. And number two, don't be afraid to refer us to friends, your Facebook friends, your LinkedIn friends, your Twitter friends, whatever. If you like what you hear, help us continue to grow because we are this close to surpassing 30,000 downloads, and that would be awesome. Also, invite your friends to join this community because as we're doing right now on a regular basis, I'm going to do live tapings of the podcast here in the community as a benefit only for members of the Facebook of the Freedom Club community. And I'm taping this live in the community right now. If you're listening and you're not a member of that community, that's who I'm speaking to right now. Please go to Facebook, search Freedom Club Community, join us. We get in discussions. We do live tapings of these podcasts where you can ask questions in real time. So please join that community. But if you regularly download, or if you don't regularly listen or download this podcast, this is one of your first times listening, thank you. I'm extremely grateful for you, wherever you are in the world, because again, we have a growing audience around the world. So today I want to talk about the issue of time poverty. And time poverty is a real thing, at least when it comes to the perception of how people value their time. Gallup, they do this regular, it's not an annual poll, but they do it semi-regularly. It's a lifestyle poll, and they find that 61% of working Americans, and actually it's about 50% of all Americans, feel that they're time poor. They just don't have enough time. You and I know those people who constantly say, I'm too busy, I'm too busy, I'm too busy, right? And when I say that time poor, that the perception of time poor is real, what I mean is this. Most people who say they're too busy, I have no doubt that they think they're too busy, but they're full of shit, right? And so there's two things I want to talk about. First is this, and if you regularly listen to this podcast or watch my videos on Facebook or LinkedIn, this is going to sound familiar to you, but I'm going to continue to repeat this mantra over and over and over again because there are some of you who need that daily reminder, and there are some of you who simply don't agree with me, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm right and you're wrong. And that's this, right? So many of us base our days on arbitrary bullshit inputs. What did you get done today? Oh, I got 10, 20, 30 to-dos done today or this week, right? That's not what you got done. That may be what you got done, but what did you actually achieve this week? Because if you're basing your days and your weeks and your months and your years on an endless and growing list of to-dos and tasks, you're not really focusing on those key outcomes that are going to drive your day forward, that are going to drive your life forward. And when you really identify just 1, 2, or 3 outcomes for your day, and you focus on just getting those things done, and you strip away all the other BS inputs, right? Like, hey, I got done today. What did you get done today? Well, we had the Monday morning staff meeting. Well, why? Because we always have the Monday morning staff meeting. That's not an outcome. That's an input that may or may not have a reasonable impact on the outcome you want today. It may not make any sense given your day, given the circumstance, etc. Right? And when you start identifying those outcomes, when you start plotting and yes, actually traveling the shortest, simplest, straightest route to those outcomes, you realize that 70% of your day is utter bullshit. And that number is much higher for many people. And listen, I say this as someone who used to have completely bullshit focused days. And it's a constant struggle for me to really focus on those outcomes because I find myself sometimes doing that busy work, doing things that I think I should do, right? And so when you do that, when you start focusing on those outcomes and you travel the straightest line to those outcomes, you strip away all the BS in your day and you realize, wow, I actually have more time. People will argue you can't create more time. You absolutely can create more time. Listen, if you think that time poverty is real, and I tell you it's real based on your perceptions, then the perception of creating more time is 100% real because I've done it. And you know what? For years, listen, I built a 7-figure agency, but it was only after I cut the time I was spending at work in half. I cut my time. I about doubled my revenue and pushed it over 7 figures. And I know that sounds counterintuitive to so many of you out there because you equate time with success. You judge your days by how many hours you work, right? You go and you post on LinkedIn and you post on Facebook. Man, someone was posting the other day, they fell asleep and they were sleeping in the WeWork photo booth. And somehow that was a measure of how successful they were. I call that, and you've heard me say it before, I call it grind and hustle porn, right? I don't admire you for doing that. I don't admire you for saying, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I don't admire you for not investing in your relationships in your life, right? I admire you for living your life, for aligning your work, your family, and yourself, for focusing on key outcomes and doing as little possible work to get there, right? Because, you know, the less time you spend at work, the more time you have to do those things that fulfill you. And a lot of you have no idea what that is. So the first part is outcomes, right? Focusing on those outcomes, right? Laser focusing on the most direct route to those outcomes instead of focusing on BS inputs. Stripping away the 70% of your day that is BS. That's part one. But the second part is this. A lot of you don't know what you would do with that extra time. If you create more time, what am I going to do? Because you haven't even thought about what in your life aside from work fulfills you. Your relationships, investing in yourself, your mental and your physical health. What does your leisure time look like? Is it just this passive leisure time in which you're staring at your phone, staring at your Facebook feed, flipping from program to program to program on Netflix and Hulu? C.K. Brightbill, he was a community health expert, a researcher, and author of a book called The Challenge of Leisure. He said, the future will belong not only to the educated man, but to the man who is educated to use his leisure time wisely. And yes, this does apply to women as well, right? If you spend 8 or 9 hours a day working, right? I don't care what job you're in, and you come home and you spend the next 6 hours just staring blindly at a computer, your phone screen, just scrolling through Facebook, or at mindless, cable news on TV, you're not exercising your brain. You're not using your leisure time wisely. I think I've said this before, but I was on a Q&A with an online mastermind I'm in, and one entrepreneur said, well, if I only worked X hours a day, am I going to waste away the rest of the day? Well, I don't know. Are you? Have you defined those things in your life that fulfill you? Your relationships, which, by the way, are the number one most important thing in your life. And a lot of people don't get that through their head. And they convince themselves, I have to hustle, I have to grind in order to save my relationships, in order to pay for my relationships. Meanwhile, your relationships are suffering because that's what you're focused on. You're focused on those inputs. So you have to really make your leisure time count. Use your body and your mind actively actively to get in that state of flow, whether you're at work or whether you're at home. Are you reading a book? Are you expanding your mind? Are you going to the gym? Are you going out and taking a walk? Are you taking a walk on the beach with your wife or husband or partner or significant other? Are you going on date nights? Are you spending time with your kids? Or are you leaving work and coming home and wasting away on the couch, staring at your smartphone, which, by the way, the more you do that, the worse your mindset is going to be. So there's two parts to this. Number one is stripping away the BS input so you can focus on those outcomes that matter. And number two is really identifying those things in your life that fulfill you so that your leisure time actually 100% counts. And so, yes, this perception that you are time poor is real, but it's only a perception. It's absolute bullshit. You got to strip away the bullshit in your life. You create time in your life, but then you have to fill that time with the things that fulfill you. So I'm going to do a little plug now because these are my airwaves and I can do that. In the words of Ronald Reagan, I paid for this microphone. This is exactly why I've created the 2019 Growth Mastermind. Right? It's not just about growing your revenue. It's not just about this Grant Cardone bullshit. If you want a 10X, don't sleep. It's about achieving true entrepreneurial freedom. And true entrepreneurial freedom doesn't just mean you grow your revenue and your paycheck. It means that you're growing your business in alignment with your family and yourself. Because work-life balance is total BS, and you have to align those three. Otherwise, you will not actually have that feeling of freedom that you desired. That was the reason you started your business in the first place. So yes, it's about creating more time because true productivity is getting the right outcomes done with less effort. That's what true entrepreneurial freedom is about. And it's about business owners coming together to share their wins, their losses, their experiences, to work together to be more productive, to find those things that fulfill them outside of work, to get that done, to stop being a victim of time poverty, taking control of your day, creating more time, doing the things that fulfill you while, yes, still growing your business, still growing your revenue. I'm not anti-money, but I want to spend as least possible time getting there and filling my pocket as possible so I can fill my heart, I can fill my bucket with the relationships, with my self-care, getting in shape, doing all those things. Because let's face it, you're not impressing anyone with your hustle and grind porn. You're just not. I'm more impressed with people who are building successful businesses while also building successful relationships, investing in themselves so their mental and physical health is top notch. That's why I've created the 2019 Growth Mastermind. And a lot of you will say, yes, that sounds great, but only a few of you will jump in. A few of you will invest in what's necessary to get there. So that's my challenge to you. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Freedom Club Podcast. I am your host, Curt Mercadante. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you.